Getting our technology organized over here. I'll begin. As you can see on the screen, we've completed through text 13 of Uddhava Gita, chapter 7. And this section stretches all the way from chapter 7 to chapter 29, so we have a long journey ahead of us. The topic, the first chapter's topic, of course, is setting the scene for the whole of Uddhava Gita. Uddhava, as we see pictured here, understands that Krishna is going to depart. They're in Dwarka, and he wants Krishna to take him with him. And he also wants Krishna to give instruction so that those like him who are attached to the temporary can become attached to Krishna and know Krishna and be with Krishna. That's the context. So it begins, chapter 7 begins, Krishna speaking, and he gives Jnana Mishra Bhakti, knowledge that leads to detachment in various ways, detachment from the temporary, detachment from the asat, detachment from duality, friends and enemies, happy, sad, and so forth and so on, detachment from the material attachment to possessions and home and relatives and material attachment to all those things, and instead bring the mind to focus upon the personality of Godhead, and then other very nice teachings about seeing all living entities similarly, all living entities in their spiritual identity, samak sarveshu bhuteshu, understanding. In other words, it's expanding on that nice verse from Bhagavad Gita, Brahmabhuta, Prasanatma Nasochatina Kangsati, etc. But so further expanding on that verse is what we've heard so far. And a little look ahead. No, wait. There's some nice graphics, but I'll do that later. So let me read the translation. Summary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. I find Bhaktisiddhanta's summaries is very interesting, how he captures in a shorter set of words the essence. So here's Bhaktisiddhanta's summary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. O my Lord, you are Yogeshwara because you are the controller of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Your yoga vinyasa, meaning that you are imparting to me the knowledge of yoga, although I am unqualified to receive it. Oh, yogatman, you are the personification of yoga. So, if I attain you, then I will attain all types of mystic yoga. Moreover, you will take birth in the house of a devotee because of his devotional service. Therefore, please award devotional service to me in a special way. And here's the BBT really long commentary. The word Yogesha here indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead awards results of all yoga practices, since all of the material and spiritual worlds emanate from the transcendental body of Krishna. There is nothing to be achieved by any yoga process except Krishna and his potencies. And since the Lord remains eternally the master of his potencies, no one can achieve anything through yoga or any other spiritual or material process except by the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word yoga means linking up, and unless we link ourselves with the absolute truth, we remain covered by the darkness of ignorance. Thus, Krishna is the goal of yoga. Paragraph. In the material world, we falsely try to link ourselves with the objects of the senses. Man wants to link with woman and woman with man. Or one tries to link up with nationalism, socialism, capitalism, or innumerable other creations of the illusory energy of the Lord. Since we are linking ourselves to temporary objects, the relationships are temporary, the results are temporary, and at the time of death we become bewildered when all of our connections are suddenly cut off by Maya. If we link ourselves to Krishna, however, our relationship with him will continue even after death, as explained in Bhagavad Gita. The relationship with Krishna that we develop in this life will continue to increase in our next life until we achieve the supreme goal of entering Krishna's planet. Those who sincerely serve the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu following the transcendental lifestyle prescribed by the Lord will enter the Lord's abode at the end of this lifetime. And the final paragraph. One can never achieve a permanent situation by mental speculation, and what to speak of by ordinary material sense gratification. The methods of Hatha Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, etc., one does not actually awaken his propensity for rendering eternal loving service to the personality of Godhead. Thus, one is bereft of the transcendental tastes of spiritual enjoyment. Sometimes the conditioned soul, disgusted by his failure to gratify his senses, bitterly decides to renounce the material world and merge into an impersonal, painless transcendence. But our actual happy situation is to render loving service at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. All of the different yoga processes gradually lead one to love of Godhead, and it is Lord Krishna's aim to reestablish the conditioned souls in this happy position. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making this perfection easily available through the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, the supreme yoga process for this age. Okay, so there's Bhakti Siddhanta's commentary, which is about the same length. Uddhava has addressed Lord Krishna in this verse as Yogesha. Sri Krishna alone is the object of worship, and he alone is to be attained through the practice of devotional service. When one understands the characteristics of devotional service, one's propensity for enjoying material objects becomes vanquished. Materialists are attached to hearing and chanting the topics of their wife and children. Learned scholars are attached to hearing and chanting the topics of scriptural debates. Yogis are attached to the distress produced from controlling their life air. Ascetics are attached to their performance of austerities, and pseudo-renunciates are attached to cultivation of dry speculative knowledge. But the servants of Sri Chaitanya are always fixed on the path of bhakti yoga, because the devotees of the Lord have adopted the process of devotional service, which is inclusive of detachment, giving up all other inferior attachments. They are real renunciates, or yukta vairagis. That is why the Supreme Lord is addressed here as Yogesha, because the servants of Yogeshvara, like Uddhava, dovetail all other yoga processes in the execution of bhakti yoga. The Lord is addressed here as yoga vinyasa. Paragraph. Because the constitutional propensities of the living entities clearly manifest in the practice of bhakti yoga, the Lord is called Yogatma. In addition, because he is the source of all types of yogas, he is referred as Yoga Sambhava. Only persons who are situated in devotional service achieve the supreme benefit of life and thus are able to properly give up all non-devotional propensities. That is the most beneficial thing that can happen to a spirit soul. Sri Krishna has mercifully taught this Paramahansya Dharma in the form of Bhakti Yoga to Uddhava. Paragraph. Renouncing the enjoyment of the fruits of one's karma and rejecting the fruits of jnana, or the cultivation of impersonalism, cannot be the cause of the living entity's ultimate benefit, because such activities are temporary and dependent. Those who have no interest in hearing the topics of the Supreme Lord are perpetually diverted from the transcendental mellows as a result of being misguided by different yoga processes such as Hatha Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. When mundane rasa displays prominence, then such people, in order to neutralize it, endeavor to practice different kinds of mystic yoga processes and thus are perpetually bereft of Bhakti Yoga. Here's Vishwanath's commentary, really short. Oh, Master of Yoga, oh, Lord of the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, oh, presenter of Jnana Yoga to me, who am not qualified for it, oh, personification of yoga, if I attain you, I've attained all yogas. However, since you appear through Bhakti Yoga and appear within your devotees, you should particularly teach me Bhakti Yoga. So he's nudging the conversation from the emphasis upon Gyan to the Bhakti side. So that's going to be a very nice section. Remember, this is the first chapter. It's kind of introducing the whole rest of the other chapters in a summary way. So these topics will be revisited, for sure. Jiva Goswami writes in his Krama Sandarbha, Uddhava said, O master of all types of yoga, O teacher of Jnana Yoga, O embodiment of all yogas, O Lord, you make your appearance through Bhakti Yoga. You have explained renunciation performed by sannyasis for the highest benefit. He speaks in 3 verses to make his request. And those are the 3 verses we're going to be discussing this morning. That's the first of them. Should be very clear from the commentaries. Here's verse 15, and it's much shorter. My dear Lord. What happened here? My dear Lord, O Supreme Soul, for those whose minds are attached to sense gratification, and especially for those bereft of devotion unto you, such renunciation of material enjoyment is most difficult to perform. That is my opinion. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, same verse. My dear Lord, O super soul of all, I think that it is extremely difficult for those whose minds are attached to sense gratification and are bereft of devotion unto you to renounce material desires, which is true. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary being summarized by Bhaktisiddhanta, if it is difficult to follow this process, even for your devotees whose minds are still attached to material enjoyment, then there is no doubt that it must be very difficult for the non-devotees. The purport by the BBT, those who are truly devoted to the Supreme Lord do not accept anything for their personal gratification, but rather accept those things suitable to be offered to the Lord's loving service, or in the Lord's loving service. The word Vishayatma bihi, Vishayat mabihi, indicates those who desire material objects for their personal gratification instead of for the devotional service of the Lord. The minds of such materialistic persons are suitably disturbed, and it is virtually impossible for such persons to renounce material enjoyment. This is the opinion of Uddhava. And the purport by Bhaktisiddhanta. Uddhava said, the devotees of the Supreme Lord never desire to accept anything that has not been first offered to the Lord. Therefore, apart from the ingredients of the Lord's service, it is natural for them to give up the desire for enjoying objects that are not related to Krishna. But lusty non-devotees who are busy collecting objects for sense gratification are fit to be called materialists because they have no propensity for the Lord's service. There is no possibility for such people to give up the desire for enjoying objects that are not related to the Lord. That is my opinion. Because that first verse, 14, there's 3 verses in a row that are Uddhava's response to what Krishna has said so far. It's being characterized as Gyan Yoga, or otherwise as Gyan Mishra Bhakti Yoga. But it was strong emphasis upon knowledge, and now he's wanting more directly bhakti because he understands it's through bhakti alone that he or others, but can attain. But it's difficult to follow this process, to detach from material desire. Very difficult, it's in his opinion, and in fact. So he's wanting Krishna to address that fact. Very relevant, isn't it? Now, on the screen, you can see some nice graphics. There's Krishna's lotus feet with some flowers by his feet. Our actual happy situation is to render loving service at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. All the different yoga processes gradually lead one to love of Godhead. And it is Lord Krishna's aim to reestablish the conditioned souls in this happy position. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making this perfection easily available through the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, the supreme yoga process for the sage. So we read that. This is just a repeat and some illustration, nice illustration of Krishna's lotus feet. Now that's a bhakti message, obviously. That's the happy situation. The obstacle mentioned is attachment to the temporary, or affinity for sense gratification. And how to get beyond it is the question we're hearing. Here's text 15. Those who are truly devoted to the Supreme Lord do not accept anything for their personal gratification, but rather accept those things suitable to be offered to the Lord in loving service. Fantastic illustration, isn't it? Nice offering plate or tray or table or whatever, somebody's hand underneath, offering to Krishna. And that's the happiness. Now the act of making an offering can become mechanical, routine, and not so tasty. And that's unfortunate because the act itself is not bhakti. It's the connecting, using this word that's been used in the purport here. It's the connection with the personality of Godhead through the medium of bhakti. But it, in principle, just as fruit, flower, leaf, and probably there's some water up there too. etc. That is, all of one's paraphernalia of life we offer to Krishna. We use in service to Krishna. And that's the antidote to material desire. Material desire is wanting to be the enjoyer of those things, or on the subtle platform, to enjoy the sensibility of one being a pious person, and I'm a pious person, I'm enjoying thinking of myself as a pious person, and so forth. So gross or subtle enjoyments on the material plane. That's our affinity. It is a long-standing conditioning, and it's not easy to overcome it. Now, the promise is bhakti is the medium or the means for overcoming that affinity, the strongly rooted material desire, material meaning, separate from Krishna desire. Very strong. Lots of lifetimes of conditioning, who knows, countless lifetimes of conditioning. So it's a deeply rooted tendency. Or like the question yesterday evening about false ego tendency. False ego is, as was discussed yesterday evening, it's the first thing that covers the soul, and it's the last thing that we leave behind. It's most subtle covering of consciousness, and it doesn't let go very easily, or we don't let go of it very easily. And from that false ego, from the I comes the mind, and then there's the paraphernalia. So there's these two areas. Stuff, or the paraphernalia that we're interacting with, and it's not just turn that off and become a stone. That doesn't work, because we're not stones. We're sentient beings. So seeing paraphernalia, seeing the universe, and whatever part of it we're in contact with as objects or objects of the senses, tanmatra, to be used in Krishna service. That's the training. We've heard it again and again. And then there's the practice. So this little illustration is an entry level of taking those things that we sustain our life with, the fruits and grains and vegetables and other edibles, we offer them to Krishna. And things that were, without going too much further, things that are of this world, we make an offering to Krishna in a formal way. And then that is that consciousness of offering, not just the mechanical ring a bell and say some words, but the consciousness of offering to Krishna for his pleasure. It carries over into all the other activities of life. Occupation, household, going to the marketplace, going for a walk, turning on the heat when it's cold in the winter, and so forth. We're recognizing the connection of all things, not just making practical arrangements for becoming comfortable and happy. It's another platform. Bhakti is another platform. And I think I'll just go to this other image. We'll begin with this tomorrow. What happened? There we go. This is tomorrow's verse. The Lord certainly answers the prayers of a repentant devotee, desperate to escape from the clutches of illusion. Looks like a very terrible ocean, not a very nice place to go swimming. What to speak if you're in the middle of the ocean? It's not just swimming, it's surviving. So what to do? And the call for this connection with the personality of Godhead. Call and devotion, not just please rescue me, but please engage me in service, because that's the antidote for illusion, the clutches of illusion. That's the question, or the topic that Uddhava is raising. So that's what we'll begin tomorrow. with text 16, and we'll go further from there probably. Let's see if there's some discussion in the room, then we'll go online. Go ahead, speak, just speak.
Good Maharaj, I'm just trying to understand the context. Is this spoken in the third canto where Maitreya, Vidura, or just before that Krishna speaks to Uddhava? Is that the time when...
The very first class, you go back and listen, because I spent the whole class going through the chronology. But just to keep it simple, this is being spoken in Dwarka. At the end of chapter 27 or 29, Krishna instructs Uddhava, go to Badrikashram and deliver this message and give my association through your association, carrying my message to them. He leaves. Krishna is still in Dwarka. Krishna tells the residents of Dwarka, let's go to Prabhas. They're still preparing. Let's go to Prabhas and become purified. They go to Prabhas, they're annihilated. Krishna now goes to the shore of the sea. Balaram departs in a very interesting way. And Krishna is sitting there. And Uddhava, knowing that Krishna is leaving, he comes back again to the very place where Krishna departs from and asks again. At that place, this is in Prabhas, Maitreya comes. And Maitreya hears that second discussion. We don't have the details, at least I'm not aware of the details of that second discussion. So that's not what Uddhava Gita is. It's in Dwarka, that's Uddhava Gita. So there's this nice painting, very beautiful painting. It's described in the third canto. Krishna is leaning against a banyan tree. This is at Prabhas. You see in the painting, there's the river Saraswati. That's where Prabhas, the river enters into the sea. And Uddhava's there. In the background over by the side is Maitreya, and he's hearing this second discussion. And then Krishna again sends Uddhava to Badrikashram and tells Maitreya, here's some service for you. Vidura is going to come, and you give him instructions as you've heard. So then that's in third canto. And then going back to the earlier than that in the third canto is Vidura's on pilgrimage and he goes to Prabhas and he finds out what happens and he goes to Vrindavan. Uddhava, how's everybody, how's Krishna and Balaram? He knows that they've departed. Anyway, that's the chronology.
Question from Archana Vaidya Mataji. Is seeing duality a sign of ignorance?
Is seeing duality a sign of ignorance?
Also seeking clarification on we have to see duality for proper discrimination. How can we engage this propensity in Krishna's service?
Well, with detachment. I don't know where you are, but right here it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a duality. So we don't go out in our bare feet. We take, proper measure because it's cold outside. And et cetera, et cetera. We address ourselves in practical ways in Krishna service to the display of duality that's before us at the moment. We recognize what it is, that's knowledge, with detachment. And appropriately, the detachment becomes possible through devotional service, because otherwise we're attached. I don't like it cold, or I don't like it hot, or I don't like it something. We get our attachments activated if we're not engaged in devotional service. Now, even for one who's engaged in devotional service, just like somebody asked me the other day, what's your favorite season? I said, spring. They said, me too. So we can have our favorites. Maybe, anyway. Krishna Prasadam is Krishna Prasadam, but you may like your favorite Krishna Prasadam. That's okay. When people ask me, what's your favorite Prasadam? I say, variety. Because I know if I say one thing, it's going to be, that's what I'm going to get. And so how do we deal with duality? We deal with it, knowledge and detachment. And the knowledge part is ideally not just your own discriminating faculty, but the teaching of Scripture, the knowledge that's coming from the Apaurushaya Shabda source. That's the best way to see duality, properly discriminate one thing from another thing. That intelligence is of the soul, but in our conditioned state, best to take full strength from Scripture, because it's not fallible. Our senses are fallible. I was thinking about this just this morning. Apaurushaya Shabda is beyond the four defects. But we're perceiving Apaurushaya Shabda with defective senses, hearing and mind, assessing. That's just, it's unavoidable. We're going to make mistakes even in understanding or receiving or even repeating Apaurushaya Shabda. But that's part of acceptance of our situation and part of our purification. We continue to hear, we Shravanam Kirtanam, and gradually purification, and our senses also become purified by that method. Anyway, that's a detail. That's how we practically engage in recognizing duality as we're moving along the bhakti path.
Question from Atulya Devidasi Mataji. Maharaj, could you please elaborate on how turning the heater high can be connected to Krishna?
How doing what?
Turning the heater high.
Turning the heater. And when it's cold, you turn the heater up.
Be connected to Krishna. It is interesting. Just yesterday, I was thinking about the temperature in the house.
When you read the names, just leave the Devi Dasi, leave the Mataji part out, because that's redundant. Devi Dasi, Mataji? No. Devi Dasi. Okay, so, and some ladies in our Hare Krishna movement, they don't like being called Mataji. There's some Prabhupada disciples. There's a political issue involved in that. So most of our devotees aren't going to be stuck like that, but Devi Dasi. Okay. To be peaceful, so that you can prosecute Krishna consciousness nicely. If you're an ascetic, then you don't need to touch the thermostat. And ascetics may have hard hearts because they can withstand any extremes of heat or cold or this or that, pleasure or pain, their hearts may be hard instead of soft. And for us, it's the purpose of adjusting the thermostat in Krishna's service is so that we can peacefully carry on with our minds less distracted by discomfort, more peaceful by within a reasonable boundary zone, feeling all right. Just like, for example, in many cases, Prabhupada would speak about the very nature of this world that's miserable. The very nature of a body is miserable. Then he would refer to the fan. It's very hot. And so we're thinking, we'll make some progress. We get a fan, we turn a fan on. We're making advancement through science. But the fact is, we're miserable. That's why we need the fan. And it doesn't really it is not what real happiness is turn the fan on when it's really hot, or air conditioning, or whatever are the other technology enhancements of material comfort. But no, back to the question. So it's not, now I'm happy. That's not devotional service. It's not facilitating your devotional service, thinking, now I'm happy. It's just getting to, for each one of us, a place where we can maximize giving our attention to Krishna's service. And thinking, when you asked your question, an example. When Prabhupada was planning Mayapur in Vrindavan construction, he wanted that the devotees would have accommodation that were reasonably close to Western standards, because otherwise the Western devotees coming to Mayapur Vrindavan wouldn't be able to be peaceful. And sure enough, that's what happened, without details. So when there's reasonably comfortable accommodation, then the purpose of that is to peacefully give your undivided attention to the bhakti process, the activities, and the sangha, and the worship, and etc. Within reason. We still have to tolerate because it's cold even when you turn the temperature up. Or sometimes people turn the temperature high.
Question from Sri Radhika Devidasi. Some commentaries or literature provide further details or understanding on the pastimes from the Bhagavatam. How do we understand this in light of the fact that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest literature?
The Srimad Bhagavatam in the heavenly planets, I forget the number of verses. Madhvacharya gives the number of verses of Srimad Bhagavatam in the heavenly planet, and it's a really big number. I forget, 3 billion or something like that. So we have a pocket version of Srimad Bhagavatam as far as Krishna's eternal pastimes from the Aparushaya Shabda source. Now, having said that, so that is to say, there's lots and lots and lots of details that may not be in the 18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam that are parts of Krishna's pastimes. And how do we discern what are some other details about Krishna's pastimes that are, or the devotees of the Lord, or the incarnations of the Lord, etc., etc. So it needs to come from the same Aparushaya Shabda source, or the infallible source. And that's like the Bhagavatam is coming from, it's the product of the samadhi of Vyas, and in his trance, he has realizations. Now, the realizations are summarized in 4 verses, but the rest of the Bhagavatam is an expanding of what those realizations are. That was the instruction of Narada. So similarly with the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the 6 Goswamis, for example, that they should write transcendental literature. So in their samadhi, they have they have experiences of details that are not within the verses, the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, and they're expressing them. And they're not Shastra Praman, they're Samadhi Praman. They're Bhakti Praman. There's their realizations in pure Bhakti. So at least for followers of Lord Chaitanya and followers of Rupa Goswami and followers of Rupa Goswami, those who are perfected souls, we accept they're as authoritative as the 18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam, pursuant to, so that, but those realizations, one of the litmus tests it must comply with is there's no inconsistency with the message of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Question from Leela Smaran Prabhu. What does taking shelter in Bhakti Yoga mean? How to differentiate that one can use things or principles from Hatha Yoga?
How do you do what?
How to differentiate
How to differentiate, okay.
that one can use things or principles from Hatha Yoga or other forms of yoga, but not taking shelter in them.
It's the Yukta Vairagya principle, that is to say, supposing somebody practices Hatha Yoga, I know some devotees that practice Hatha Yoga along with their devotional service, and it's to assist them, it's pursuant to, it's like turning the thermostat up and when it's really cold. It's pursuant to making the Krishna connection through devotion stronger. So if one's body is whatever, through the result of Hatha Yoga practice, one may accept, and then another may not. It's not the one that does is wrong or the one that doesn't is wrong. It's what's important in accepting principles is the practical result and the consciousness behind. Is it to benefit or is it just, a distraction? Like, this is, according to the commentary here, Krishna is giving Uddhava Gyan Yoga. Now, there's other places that says Gyan Mishra Bhakti Yoga. But take it Gyan Yoga. Why is Krishna giving Gyan Yoga? Because it's pursuant to Bhakti. It's pursuant to detachment and absorption in Him. Because without detachment, there isn't absorption in Him. Or Sankhya Yoga, all this really elaborate description in Kapila Dev's teachings to Devahuti. It sounds like Gyan, and the Gyanis love it. They don't reach the conclusion of take shelter of Krishna. So we take advantage because it helps us discriminate. Gyan is to discriminate between theirs temporary and theirs eternal. And then meditation upon the eternal, then devotion to the eternal. So it's not a diversion, provided the connection with transcendence, with the personality of Godhead is made. The difficulty is one could become attached to the diversion, and then it's a diversion, thinking that's all in all, or having more faith in that than bhakti. That's a risk, a potential problem. But so that the Krishna bhakti connection is the important element. Then we can accept things, yukta vairagya.
Question from Snehavalli Devidasi. So Vidura, after meeting Maitreya, goes to Hastinapur and meets Yudhishthir Maharaj, and then Dhritarashtra left Hastinapur. Is the chronology correct?
Correct.
Question from me. A Vaishnava does not aspire a Vaishnava does not aspire for heaven, since there is the danger of attachment to the endowments. If there is a Srimad Bhagavatam in the heavenly realm, is it correct to assume that there must be a further bhakti process progression
Oh, yeah.
from heaven as well?
Yeah. They don't have to, but it's a nice option. Yes. Yes. That's it?
That's it.
It's regarding the sense gratification. So they're saying that thing is here, like if we are having, our minds are attached to sense gratification, so we are bereft of devotion unto Krishna. So is that the knowledge what we are learning is getting the knowledge of about Krishna, what we are learning through Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, is it that is bringing us towards Krishna or getting us detached towards the sense gratification, or is it that we need to make a separate effort to...
I'm confused. I think I understand your question, but I'm a little confused by the question. When we read the Bhagavatam or we read Bhagavad Gita, there's knowledge. And it can stay on the platform of knowledge. And the fruit of knowledge, it leads to detachment, but not attachment to Krishna, necessarily. So, when you use these terms, it's important to make the distinction, because the starting point of your question is, as far as sense gratification is concerned. Knowledge may lift one above sense gratification temporarily, but affinity for sense gratification, like a bungee cord, is going to pull one back down again. So knowledge alone is not sufficient. Now, let's go to the bhakti process. With bhakti, there's also knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, abundant knowledge. But it's knowledge that's connected to or facilitates bhakti. And so for those who are trained in bhakti, when they receive that knowledge, it's not just for the sake of detachment alone. It's meant to give support to and help nourish the bhakti of life itself, the real goal. As that real goal is reached, we heard this in the previous verse, spontaneously, without the sense of good and bad or right and wrong and do's and don'ts, naturally one will abide by the do's and the don'ts. Even if you don't know what they are, the example is given, even an innocent child that has certain qualities, then there may be affectionate, and they may be this and that. They may be not do bad things, and just by their nature and their innocence. So the children can also be very mischievous. But when they do something when the stage of mature bhakti is reached, then the following of vidhis, detachment from affinity for sense gratification, it follows. It's built in to the bhakti process. So now, knowledge, using Prabhupada's expression from Nectar Devotion, may help one get a foothold. Remember that phrase? You know what a foothold? Supposing you have to climb. So, slippery and it's steep. So if you get a foothold, then you can go a little higher. So knowledge can serve like a foothold. But it's not essential to the bhakti process. It's not something you hold on to. It's, it may be assist to some degree initially, but then if you don't reach bhakti, Krishna through bhakti, that's back down again. Knowledge is insufficient. It helps in detachment, but it's insufficient. Bhakti is sufficient. So when we read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, we understand the ensnarement, the obscuring of Krishna that comes from sense objects, enjoying the sense objects in sense enjoyment mood, that obscures Krishna and Krishna Bhakti. That's knowledge. We're not in Bhakti yet, we're just knowing that's an obstacle. So let me refrain on the strength of knowledge, at least preliminarily, so I can strengthen Bhakti. When Bhakti is there, that detachment is already there. It's a subset. But it may help me get a foothold. But otherwise, if it's not, Bhakti is the third time. If Bhakti isn't reached, then one comes back again. The Ferris wheel, up and then back down again. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything more online, or we're done? Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.